Welcome to Dark Stories for You. Today's story, Whispers in the Wilderness, a nightfall expedition into the unknown. In the depths of the Canadian wilderness, where the towering trees guard ancient secrets and the night sky holds its breath, a family sought solace in the embrace of nature. Their quest for adventure led them beyond the conventional campgrounds to a secluded haven, an RV nestled in the heart of untamed wilderness. Little did they know that this seemingly idyllic escape would unfurl into a tale of suspense and peril, where the tranquility of the forest masked an impending darkness. Join me on this chilling expedition as we delve into the shadows, where the crackling campfire illuminates not just the faces of those gathered, but also the mysterious forces that lurk in the hidden corners of the night. This is not merely a camping trip. It's an invitation to confront the unknown, to unravel the enigma that awaits beneath the starlit canopy. I was going on a camping trip with my family members at age 10. They are all rather used to nature as they live out in the remote areas of Canada and went camping regularly. Now, we didn't go to any set campgrounds, but instead, we decided to head out to the heart of the wilderness, where my relatives had done days of laboring work ahead of time, clearing areas so we can fit an RV on our own private camping spot. In total, we were 6 people. The first night was rather normal, except for one point in the middle of the night. The sky was clear with a nice view of the stars overhead. We were sitting around a campfire, watching the flames burn and listening to the crickets and other wilderness noises. Then, at one point, we were in the middle of a conversation when I saw one of my relatives turning and twisting in his chair as he tried to get a good view of the tree line. We stopped our conversation immediately, and our heads snapped to look at him. He turns to us and says, "You guys hear that?" We looked at each other as we focused on the sounds around us. I only heard the fire crackling, and that was the issue. The sounds of the wilderness completely stopped. Out of fear of a big animal approaching, my relative rushed into the RV to get a gun while the rest of us followed. We waited for an hour or two in the RV, waiting for the sound of footsteps, but none came. The wilderness returned to its natural state, and it was lively again. After that first night, we didn't get as much sleep as we were scared a bear, or maybe a pack of wolves were going to come around. That would be the least of our issues, it seemed. But nevertheless, we continued to camp like nothing happened. That next day, we were out on the lake fishing when we saw a few people dotting a small little island in the middle of it. It wasn't necessarily unnatural to see people out here, but what we were doing was technically illegal, so we didn't want a lot of people seeing what we were doing. But we continued to fish calmly as to not draw attention to ourselves. After 15 minutes or so of fishing, we saw a boat depart from that island and head directly toward us. We considered booking it, but realized that it would make our presence seem more suspicious, so we waited. They eventually got to us, and there were 2 men in the boat. One of them was skinny and had a white tank top, jean shorts, and a blue cap. The other one was more plump and wore a camo vest with a white t-shirt underneath, matching jean shorts, and the same blue cap. "Hey, what are you guys doing out here?" said the skinny man, already sounding somewhat accusatory. We told him that we just drove out here today, just for a day of fishing. Despite our somewhat normal story, they seemed to see through our charade. When the plump man interrupted my relative and said, "You guys don't happen to know about that fire on the other side of this lake, do ya?" My relative tried to lie and said he had no clue, and tried to confirm that we only got there that morning just to fish. After a few more lines of dialogue, they seemed to believe us and told us not to stay until nightfall, as the animals are bad in the area. They turned their boat around and headed back to the island. Me and my relative looked at each other thinking we dodged a bullet, but that bullet would still head directly towards us. That night, it happened. 4 of my relatives decided to hunt through the night, as they had made a custom hunting blind earlier that day. They took the weapons and headed out as me and my other relative headed to sleep for the night. I was listening yet again to the sounds of the wilderness, and I was also listening when they started to fade away again. As they faded away, new sounds emerged in the night. Footsteps. Initially, I thought it was my relatives coming back from the hunt after getting something. But to my dismay, it wasn't. I heard someone say, "Hey, you kids here." Even at such a young age, I could tell there was malicious intent behind these words. I slowly got out of the bunk bed and swiftly moved toward the closest window to ensure my dread was warranted. As I peeked out of it, I saw the same two guys from the boat and three people I've never seen before. Despite the change in apparel, I could tell it was them. As they walked into our campsite, they went to the two tents in front of the RV where we kept some extra supplies. They barely looked inside before all of them turned to the RV and slowly stepped over to it. I tried to silently bolt over to my relative to try and get his help and wake him up. But when I started shaking him awake, he said loudly, "Leave me alone, it's the middle of the night." That triggered a chain of events I only thought would be possible in my nightmares. Immediately after saying that, these guys started banging on the RV, telling us to open up and unlock the door. The second they started doing this, my relative woke up fast and ran to the kitchen and opened a drawer to find some kitchen knife. We got far away from the door and waited for the banging to stop. When it did, the door flew outward and we saw three of the guys stomp into the RV. They slowly looked around the cramped RV and stopped when they finally caught our gaze. Our fear was obvious. There was no mistaking it for any other emotion. We had no power here. The skinny man from earlier walked over to us, and my relative swung his knife at him. It cut his hand a little bit, but he got adrenaline from it and ripped the knife from his hand, and it clambered onto the ground. We were defenseless, so when they grabbed me and put me on my feet and forced me out of the RV, all I could do was scream and struggle. They gripped me by the collar of my shirt as they led us deeper into the wilderness in the middle of the night. I tried to scream, but they'd put their hand over my mouth. I looked over to my relative, who had the same thing happen to him. We couldn't do anything. The guys were laughing and joking around like this was any normal situation for them. As we walked deeper into the wilderness, the less we tried to struggle. We nearly gave up when finally, my relative bit the hand of one of the men and was able to let out one more shriek. After a grunt of pain, the guy immediately punched my relative in the face to keep him quiet and put his hand back over his mouth. We were getting close to the lake when finally we heard a loud crack. One of the guys blurted out, "Gunshot!" They were clearly confused when we heard two more gunshots ring out. The guys let go of us and we heard my relatives yelling at them. It was almost incoherent to me, purely from the suddenness of it. Our captors ran off into the wilderness, leaving us standing there in shock. Our relatives came over and assisted us back to the camper van. I was shaking and shivering despite it being a warm night. They tried to talk, but I could only shake my head and nod. We left that night, and I wasn't able to sleep well for weeks after the occasion. Thinking of what would have happened if my relative wasn't able to make that noise that drew my relatives back to us. We told the local officers in the end and told them about it, risking the fine for technically camping illegally. In the end, they never found the guys, and we haven't heard from the police since. So guys, be careful out there. Make sure you know your area and what is around you. Always stay cautious.